Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining us this evening. You're watching Stand Up Fight Back, where we discuss strategy and analysis for the progressive movement. I'm Margot Pies. I'm one of your co-hosts on the show. Right below me, that's Jackie Hernandez. She's another co-host on the show. And over on the that side, over down here, there's Carlos Marroquin, the third co-host on the show. And right above him, because this is like the Brady Bunch, I guess, where there's a bunch of squares, is Ricardo Martinez, and he's our guest tonight on the show. Just a reminder to all of our viewers, we air at 7 p.m. Pacific Time, 10 p.m. Eastern Time on Sundays. We simulcast on Facebook and YouTube, so please follow us, hit that subscribe button, tell your friends about us. We're here, we're talking about things that matter to the progressive movement, and we don't talk a lot of smack about other people. We just try to get down to business. So, Jackie, speaking of getting down to business, please tell us about our guest.
Hi, everybody. So, we invited Ricardo Martinez today to talk to us about his campaign in La Puente. He is running for city council and he's a progressive. We have met him through a friend, actually, who's also on the progressive movement. And he actually asked me a lot of questions about healthcare and how to bring healthcare to La Puente. So, that kind of made me very interested in knowing who he was and what he stood for. And then I met him as well in person when we went to a protest against Gemeco, which is a lead battery company. So there we talked a lot about environmental health, and he's committed to this movement and he's committed to the health of people, especially in his community. So yeah, I wanted to invite him in to talk about his platform. And when we talk about political strategy, we want progressive candidates to come on and also be able to lead us on how it is that we're going to make all of the strategies that we have and we talk about on the show happen. So this is the reason why we brought him in. We want candidates that are going to be with us.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, so first of all, we want to get into today, which is September 11th. So we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about this. So two things happened on September 11th. One in the 1970s, in I think it was 1973. That was September 11th in Chile when the coup happened and Pinochet came into power. Allende was killed, and a lot of Chileans suffered. We've seen an amazing turnaround in Chilean politics in the last year with Boric taking office, and right now they're trying to put together an entirely new constitution, a people-led constitution to get rid of the constitution that was developed under Pinochet. So it's really amazing to finally see a turnaround like this in the country. It's very long overdue, and I have a lot of hope for the Chilean people. And then, of course, on September 11th, 2001, in the United States, the Twin Towers were hit by airplanes. The Pentagon was also hit by another airplane. These were all commercial airlines, and about 3,000 people were killed. And we every year in the US, we remember those people who lost their lives very innocently in this tragic act of hate. And unfortunately, the United States' response to this was to go into a country and stay there for a very long time and achieve nothing because they went in with no agenda, and that was, of course, Afghanistan and then also Iraq as well. And there was a lot of tragedy that came out of that as well. So, Carlos, why don't you kick us off?
Yes. Well, good evening, everybody, wherever you may be watching us from. It is good to be here with you as every Sunday that we are. And we have our special guest, Ricardo, that we're going to be hearing from him soon. And he's going to be joining the conversation. But definitely one of the big events that shocked the nation was, 9/11. It's commemorated every year, and this is a time that people do pay respect to the victims of those who've fallen to 9/11. But let us also remind ourselves that there are other victims that follow 9/11, and that is consequences of the war the United States embarked with in multiple countries, by the way, and thousands of people got killed because of again the consequences of what happened in 9/11 and what the policies of the United States that they took on countries that really didn't have nothing to do with 9/11. We saw Afghanistan that how many people lost their lives there. So we are talking about hundreds of thousands of people that got end up getting killed because actions that the United States took against other countries due to 9/11. We saw that again the rush to war that again even today we are paying for those actions that other presidents took, including George Bush that took us there. But enough to say on that is I want to say this. Of the trillions of dollars that United States has spent on wars because of 9/11, we are less safe today. We are not safer. We are less safe. Actually, we just came out of a huge pandemic in which over 1 million people have been killed. And that's because of the lack of actions by a president, a sitting president, by not taking this seriously. So we are talking about the threats that America have to face day in and day out is from within, most of it. And there's a lot that we can talk about this today, but we wanted to remember those people that lost their lives. But we also wanted to remember those people that lost their lives that were innocent due to policies that follow 9/11. Those are some of the thoughts that I have right now. And it's again, trillions of dollars spent and again, with nothing to show for, very little to show for, and we are less safe today. We have MAGA, we have white supremacists that pretty much are a threat to the country. And that's what we are seeing, on our news every single day, the things that are happening around the country. Less safe. We are not safer.
Thanks, Carlos. Jackie or Ricardo, do either of you have any thoughts on 9/11 and the
Ricardo.
wars?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts. So actually, my major in college, I went to the University of California, Davis, majored in philosophy and political science, but became really interested in Latin America and U.S. foreign policy to Latin America and minored in Latin American studies. And so this is really hits home for me, right? I think Senator Bernie Sanders called it the biggest policy blunder for in recent modern history for the United States to invade Iraq and continue this war on terror policy after 9/11, right? I think we really want to remember the folks who were innocently killed and their families and the shock that had on every American. But at the same time, I think we have to be cognizant of really, like Senator Bernie Sanders has said, the policy blunder of the United States to invade Iraq and Afghanistan and be there for many years, if not decades. I think last year they began to withdrew from Afghanistan after President Biden made that correct decision, in my opinion. But yeah, I think, Carlos, you're hitting the nail on the head, right? It doesn't make us safer. It really weakens the United States and the world, and it gives leverage to people who want to do harm. And it only, the only benefit, or the people who only benefit are, the industrial, the industrial manufacturing complex of folks who make weapons, right? So these folks have benefited at our expense, and that has what he said of the trillions of dollars that we spent. We could have spent it on communities, right? On communities of color, like La Puente, LA County, or everywhere in the United States. But instead, we have given it to a small group of people are profiteering off wars and continue to this day. But yes, I do want to remember 9/11 and that day today.
Jackie, any thoughts, Jackie?
Jackie, your voice sounds like it's going through a synthesizer.
It's not working.
It's like one of those filters on Zoom. I used to,
Yeah.
I spent a summer ago filling in for a friend who was teaching science to GATE students in the San Gabriel Valley. And one of them showed up with one of these filters, and she was like, it was so funny.
That's funny.
So
Yeah,
thanks. Well,
you know,
well, oh,
go ahead.
I was just gonna say that, at the time, people thought that not only were these wars a policy blunder, but that they were illegal wars. Right? We were effectively lied into invading Iraq and after Afghanistan. At least with Afghanistan, they could say, well, the Taliban is hiding out there. At least they had that covered. But with Iraq, they had to come up with a story. We had Powell go to the United Nations and basically lie. We had they claimed that there was some kind of yellow cake, like nuclear weapon type thing going on. And I remember, that George W. Bush saying something like this. It was like the smoking gun, and then that was totally turned into a meme as well. But the whole reason to invade Iraq was based off of a lie. There were no weapons of mass destruction. They never found them. They've never produced this. Colin Powell even later on said that what he said was wrong, was based off of lies. So this was a tragedy that should have never have happened, but it did happen. And nowadays, George W. Bush and Dick Cheney are now considered heroes. For some reason, they're now heroes, American heroes, even though for a very long time George W. Bush couldn't leave the country because he was worried that he was going to be tried for war crimes. So, the legacy that these people leave behind is not forgotten, especially for those who suffered so much in Iraq and Afghanistan. And the people of Afghanistan are still suffering because the United States really in the end did absolutely nothing for them. Taliban are back in power. And also what the US did after they left, they froze all of the wealth in that country and basically stole it. So, that's the United States is not really living up to being this great country that it used to claim to be. I mean, we've had so many awful things happen in the name of the people of the United States. And really I think it's been an abuse of the people who died on 9/11. The memory of these people was used for a means that really didn't honor their lives. So that is the very sad legacy of 9/11. Carlos, is there anything else?
Yeah, I'm trying to see, Jackie, were you able to get on there, or can you say something? Yeah, she's having technical difficulties. Maybe you want to get off and log back in again. But
Yeah.
yeah, we need to move on. And we did wanted to speak to you a little bit about 9/11 because this is the day, and people are remembering that day, whatever you may be, wherever you were at when that happened. But the fact of the matter is that the money that was used for all these wars, all these many years, 20 years of going to war, has not make us any safer. We could have been using that for our schools. We could have used that money for infrastructure. Heck, we could have used that money to build a lot of housing for the people. And
Yeah.
this is again when we rush to war, when our leaders are not thoughtful, and really use that as a last resort. The consequences can be devastating. But talking about devastation, Margaret, climate change is really taking a toll around the world, not only here in the United States. The people of Pakistan, they're suffering so much. I mean, country after country, we are seeing devastation. We are seeing consequences of climate change.
Yeah, and just to quote Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. As we move into this climate change discussion, he said the United States is one of the greatest or the greatest purveyor of violence in the world. And that was in the 60s. I'm not sure if that's changed too much since then. But anyway, yeah, climate change. It's all over the news. It's everything this year. We've seen so many extreme weather events happen, and of course, like you said, Pakistan, but there's a horrible famine happening in the Horn of Africa as well that's not getting a lot of media attention. And I recommend to everyone to look into that because it's really, really horrific. And this is because the climate is changing and desertification is happening in a lot of parts of the world and it's becoming uninhabitable. You can't grow anything, right? And there's not enough water because that water is drying up. And we're also seeing that. We saw this in Europe. We're seeing this in the Southwest. We just went through a really intense heat dome in the state of California. And I think up in Northern California, they broke a few records as well in terms of how hot it was there. We also had a hurricane come by the coast of California in the past few days. So California got some rain from that and a lot of humidity and heat still. And these weather events that are seemingly rare are now becoming more common because climate change is multiplies the possibility of these rare extreme weather events. So they're more likely to happen as the planet is warming. So we're seeing a lot of that. In California, because of the heat dome, which basically meant that it was hot all day long, there was no break in the evening from the heat. People were using a lot more power because it's just so hot that they need to put the AC on probably all of the daytime. And when I was in California, I usually could wait until about 3 or 4 o'clock because that's when our house tends to get a little bit hot from the sun, and then I could put the AC on. But when the heat dome started, I was having to put the AC on several hours earlier in the day. So we saw this effect on the electrical grid. In fact, I think it was on Sunday, the state sent out a text message to residents of California asking them to please reduce your energy consumption, turn off any unnecessary electronics because we're on the verge of having a blackout and this is going to affect public health and public safety. So a lot of people turned off their non-essentials and we were able to return, I believe, 2 gigawatts of power back to the electrical grid. And this is a massive amount. 2 gigawatts of power is huge. So that shows that people can respond in real time to these emergencies and prevent blackouts. I thought that this was a really, really fantastic thing because really what this is something called demand response. And as we have these unpredictable weather events occurring and intensification of heat, it is a real strain on an electrical grid that is already, under strain just from not being upgraded, over time. Our infrastructure is really out of date, but also it's an electrical grid that is going through an energy transition, and this energy transition is not going to always be that smooth. So as we're bringing on more renewable energy, more batteries, and trying to reduce our fossil fuel consumption, we're going to have a situation that is going to be very delicate for managing the electrical grid. And so because it was so easy for them to get, effectively easy to get that 2 gigawatts worth of power back, they were able to keep the grid online and keep power going to all of the necessary services like hospitals, fire departments, the lights, right? Everybody was able to still have some AC, I think. So this was a really, really fantastic success as far as I'm concerned, as somebody who studies electrical grid and energy transitions. Jackie, I know you had some thoughts on this as well.
Okay, can you hear me now? Okay, thank
Perfect.
goodness. Yeah, no, I was actually, how you said, Market, I was actually really impressed at the effort of everybody. I know I put my part in. I was putting a 78, turning off all lights that were not necessary. So it was really interesting to see that. And as well, when we talk about, the energy grid, I saw a lot of comments, on Facebook or social media saying like, it's the government. The government doesn't want to expand this and that. Now, I have to say, partially, I wish and hope that the government did have more of a spine, I guess, to come in and be like, okay, we're going to nationalize this because right now it's currently private. So a lot of people are investing in the utilities and all of this other stuff that's, more so for it's a commodity, not a need, not a public good. And we need to ensure that this is a public good. We need to ensure that this is something that, is not just who can pay the highest money to get the more power. No, we all have to put in our part. We all have to be able to have electricity for whatever need, especially the vulnerable. We see a lot of seniors who are going to need it. We see a lot of little children who are going to need it. And to really be conscious about the needs of people. We saw the horrible stuff that happened in Texas when it was really cold and people couldn't get power and their bills were so astronomical that, it was more about the profit that they could make more than, the need and more than what we need as people. So in that sense, we when people write those comments, I feel like a lot of people don't understand how this actually works and who owns this. And I wish people did because maybe we could have more power to ensure that this electrical grid can be, part of the infrastructure bill. Because when the infrastructure bill was coming out, this was part of the plan. It's part of the plan to expand it to ensure that people are going to have more resources. So in many ways, I was hoping that the infrastructure bill was going to pass at the maximum money that there was in the beginning, which I don't even remember because how many times it's been, being changed, had been changed. But that initial money was for 10 years and it would have helped things like this. It would have provided union jobs for people to also maintain the grid. So those are just some thoughts that I wanted to point out there about that because when I see comments, I kind of get a little worried that people are not really understanding how this is happening, how it affects us.
Right. There's a lot of money that needs to be invested into this energy transition, especially in terms of building out transmission lines and that type of infrastructure so that we can connect a lot of the new development that's coming online. We have gigawatts, hundreds of gigawatts worth of power that is waiting to be developed, and they're in these queues, these lines that are called interconnection queues. And the wait time to get approved to be connected to the electrical grid is actually getting longer in the last couple of years. So there's a lot of policy that needs to be changed around that. And then there's also a question of who pays for for the new transmission, right? Because one of the things is you don't want to have people complaining that they're actually paying more for their electricity. And so that's a problem. You don't want to risk upsetting the consumer because they may turn against the whole project of moving away from fossil fuels. In the same way, you don't want your grid to be unreliable and have blackouts because you don't want them to turn away from renewable energy, or low carbon energy sources. In addition, you could have nuclear. So, this is this is why this is such a delicate thing. And it's true, a lot of people have no idea how the electrical grid works. They have no idea how this energy transition is happening. And the thing about solar is that solar is so cheap, basically, because the investment is upfront. So all what you need is to invest money to build out that infrastructure, right? And then after that, it's pretty much free aside from maintenance because you don't have to buy any fuel. The sun is free, sunlight is free. So the operation is so cost effective that over time that price is going down to basically like selling onto the electrical grid for like going to be like $0 per megawatt hour. You know, in Morocco right now, it's 1 penny per megawatt hour. So I have been thinking about this a lot, actually, Jackie, because you were talking about, you know, we should have public utility. I was thinking that when you have an abundance of energy coming onto the grid all at once, that it's actually something that capitalism and markets don't really understand how to handle. And this is a problem that I'm seeing with the solar industry because there's something called solar value devaluation. So because like I'm saying, the price keeps going down, so the profit margins are decreasing. So you're at risk of not getting enough investment into these projects, or if you don't plan correctly for the amount of power that's going to be curtailed or wasted, because all solar panels in that region are going to be producing the same amount of power at the same time, right? You risk losing that power plant, and we don't want to lose that power plant. We want all that power available for us when we need it. So I was thinking that maybe the problem, and I don't really say this aloud because it depends on, you know, who I'm speaking with, because this is controversial for some groups, but maybe the problem is that we're trying to make a profit off of solar power, and maybe it should just be we find a way to get that investment in there, and maybe that costs, and we amortize that over time. But then afterwards, maybe it just, you know, if you can run it without a profit, maybe that's good enough, right? And I think that this is part of the problem, is that solar and maybe wind is going to be like this too, but especially solar is facing these problems. Like, maybe the problem is that it's not something that you can run as a profit, right? You're gonna have to, maybe it's okay to take it at a loss. And maybe that is an argument for having it as a public utility operated part of the power system, or at least as some kind of nonprofit, because I think about this a lot because this is one of my side projects, and I deal with like, how can you fix that particular problem? And I always have this thought in my head, like, you're trying to solve this so that it fits into the whole profit motive, but really, the solution is probably not to try to make a profit out of it.
Well,
Anyway.
right. Talking about all this, Jackie, I think our guest, you know, uh, we're trying to find solutions as well, and some of the solutions is uh, has to do with leadership, leadership at every level of government, and some of the things that we have been pushing for, at least in this program and the conversations that we have had, is that we need people to run for office. We want to see candidates run for office that have ideas such as, you know, what you're describing, be able to push for policies that instead of, you know, privatizing things, but actually, you know, make it all about public and you know, perhaps even, you know, having the public be owners of this, not the private. So I'd like us to, if you want to talk a little bit, introduce Ricardo a little bit more, and I'd like to hear about some of his ideas that he may have, because, you know, we got to bring this to the local level. And yes, this is a global crisis, a national crisis, a statewide crisis that we are seeing, but it starts really at a local level.
Yeah, is that on me? I wanted to mention, I think, Margaret, what you were saying of lithium and solar, like in Latin America, they're trying to, um, capitalists and corporations are trying to bank in on lithium deposits in South America, like Bolivia, Chile, and Argentina. And it's really interesting what you're saying, right? Of this profit motive, because Bolivia has it, for example, and they want to give it, or at least have them, the state run it, but they're not giving them investments, or they're not sending engineers to help them because it's not going to be for profit. So that needs to change, right? And it's gonna take time, but yeah, going back to your point of leadership and bringing new people. That's why I'm doing this, because I think that in my city, in the city of La Puente, there's been absolutely just leadership for a few, right? Leadership for the people who have money, leadership for the people who are well connected, and there hasn't been leadership for working class people or people of color or low income folks or undocumented people. And we need to bring that, right. And that's why really I'm doing this. I grew up here in the city of La Puente, is largely Latino based. Over 80% of the population is Latino. Income here on average is 65,000. So this is really a working class town, and we don't have people that are working class or have that perspective in city council. And I think that's really that shouldn't be the case, because then they're not going to be legislating the way that the way that in a way that represents everybody in the city, right? And yeah, going back to what you're saying of starting this at the local level, I mean, with the climate crisis that we're facing, it really starts at the local level. And yes, we have to get more folks involved and elected, because there are just so many issues that, like, I've been learning. For example, here in the city, they don't have what I've seen at least at the LA County, what are called sort of rebates for changing the yards and giving folks rebates for native plants, because that way we save some water, right? We don't water grass that's essentially not for this climate, and we need to implement that in the city of La Puente. But there are so many issues also with regards to transportation, pavement, right? We have essentially created, brought sort of heat to communities by, paving the streets with, like, asphalt, and that attracts heat, and that in turn affects the community that lives here. So we really need to look at everything. I think there isn't there isn't that understanding, at least here from the city council members that are there, about the crises that we face, right? Because this is really going to be the new normal. Like, this climate, this heat wave, we're probably going to continue to have these for the years to come. So how is it that we prepare for them, right? We have to really start acting on these solutions that a lot of people are bringing up. I'm not an expert, like, on environmental policy or anything like that, but that doesn't mean that I can go into city council and bring in experts like Margaret or somebody else, right? It's about being resourceful and bringing the people who know how to do specific policy, and letting them giving them that perspective, and that sort of giving them an entrance, or like at the door, right, for them to come in, and not the city contract consulting firm that is then paid thousands of dollars for doing the bare minimum. Um, but yeah, I'm not sure where else you wanted to go with this, or Jackie.
I think
That
Jackie,
was
for you.
Yeah. No, I think it's a really good resource to have when politicians are like, hey, I'm not an expert, but let me bring in the experts and make those decisions upon, people who are here, like talking like Margaret, who's a scientist talking about this. Like, we want to hear from people like her to ensure that, hey, when we make decisions, when I make that decision, I'm consulting with people who know. I'm consulting with people who are conscious of this, not only conscious of, like, oh, we're going to save energy, or we're going to do this, like, we're going to have people shut down the energy, but also, how do we innovate? How do we go to the next step? Because we can't just also have people telling them, like, you're going to have to cut this and this and this every day. when the climate is going to get worse. And when we talk about cooling centers as well, like what's happening with the unhoused community, right? What's happening with the farm workers? I also want to kind of talk a little bit about that, because we're going to have a lot of essential workers out there, and we're going to call them essential because they were called like that in the pandemic, and we know that they're essential. Every worker is essential. We're having workers out there in the fields, out there in the heat, and what's going to happen to them as well. Like, we have a bill right now to protect farm workers, and Gavin Newsom has not signed it, and we're not sure if he is going to sign it, and we need him to sign it, because when these conditions happen, and they're going to happen way more often, we have people out there in the heat waves, they're going to die. And we have people in homes that also can't just stay at home without AC, they're going to die. And this is a real situation. People in India just this past season as well, like I think it was like in May, died of heat exhaustion. We know this is coming, and we know, no, not even coming. We know this is here, but it's going to be coming even more as we go along. And one thing that I do want to touch base on with you, Ricardo, regarding the unhoused community, because this is going to be a population who's the most vulnerable as well, out in the street, not having water, not having, ways to protect themselves. So, what have you been seeing, in your work with mutual aid, or anything that you've been seeing in the field in regards to this population, and what would be some things that you would propose locally to help?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And so I'm involved with La Puente Mutual Aid. This is a local mutual aid group that community members and I founded back in 2020 after the pandemic began and the George Floyd protests started to really re-examine the city's budget, right? City's budget, and where are funds allocated and why are they allocated to security and policing. At least over 50% of it, right? We need to think about that, and how can we, maybe a little bit of that money or all of it could go somewhere else and sustain the long-term sustainability of communities. But going back to your question about unhoused populations, right now, La Puente Mutual Aid started doing a water drop every weekend, and we've done it every other weekend, or some weekends like this weekend we didn't do it, unfortunately. But last weekend, for Labor Day weekend, we were out there Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, because it was very hot. And there's always in between 20 to 35 or so unhoused folks in La Puente. And these are oftentimes regular people who, are from here or have been unhoused in and around La Puente. And it's very unfortunate, like super tragic to see and talk to them and like listen to them and get to hear from them, because I think they've really been abandoned, right? They've been abandoned by the community at large and by leadership. And by leadership, I mean by city council and elected officials, right? Because I don't think nobody should be unhoused. Like, we should have housing for everybody. Like, nobody should be living on the streets. And I've learned too that for the Hacienda La Puente Unified School District, the school district that represents La Puente and nearby cities, there are like around 700 or so children who are unhoused or on the verge of being unhoused. And when I learned that figure, I was just like, what? Like, I didn't realize that there were so many kids, like literally kids, on the verge of homelessness. Like, they're worrying about, they have their whole future to worry about, but no, they're really worrying about the basics of like having a home, right? So I think it's a crisis that we face, and now we're going to have even more unhoused populations because of the rent freeze that is ending, or I think ended already in LA County, but throughout many cities, because during COVID they implemented a lot of measures to not increase rents or freeze outright rent increases. But now that it's sort of over, COVID is winding down. That is going to end. Where are all these folks who are not going to be able to pay? Where are they going to go, right? A lot of them are not going to have a place to go. And that's where cities need to step in and support them. So in La Puente, they created actually a wraparound program called PROS, PROS. I forget what it stands for, but this was actually because of La Puente Mutual Aid efforts, the city used American Rescue money to create this program last year. And so far, I think I've heard, at least from a lot of the unhoused folks, they've told me like about the staff and that they go out and meet them. But many of them are waiting for like a voucher or waiting for to get housed, right? And I think that's a big problem. Like we shouldn't have to have people waiting in the streets till they get housing. Like they should be housed immediately, right? We have places where, houses are vacant. Why are we not using these houses, right? Why isn't the city managing these houses for unhoused populations? Why aren't we issuing, rent control measures so that, we don't have future unhoused populations in the future? So there's a lot of things to be done. But for one key thing I think that I want to do is have like water stations in the city, because at the end of the day, there are at least here some folks in La Puente who have been unhoused for many years, and oftentimes don't like either talking to people or don't want to interact with others. And I think it's incumbent upon city officials to provide them aid, right? Like, water or a place for them to stay at night. Why don't we have the big market shopping, parking lots that are empty at night? Why don't we have it for them, right? We need to start like thinking outside the box really and supporting these folks who are out here not because of their own will, but because of the circumstance that something happened in their family. Maybe they're struggling mentally. You don't know. We don't know, right? So I think it's really incumbent upon the city to go out there and talk to them. And that's one thing that I would do. Water stations, making sure that this wraparound program is not really linked to the sheriffs, because it's not linked to the sheriffs, but they do have like the support of the sheriff's department. And I think that needs to be completely detached, right? I don't think the sheriffs and the police should be in any way or form involved with unhoused populations at all. Like they should be focusing on crimes and solving murders or whatnot, but not in like helping people, right? So that's another thing that I want to focus on, and also focusing on how do we prevent future unhoused populations, right? And with that, I really want to do a massive survey of the city. I want to have like city staff and possibly organizations and community go out to households and door knock and ask them questions like how many people live here, what is your name, what are your needs, things like that. Things like that would inform the city and would really create a profile about what is it that we need to do in the next couple of years, right? Because if you don't understand the people that you represent, then you're not going to be able to implement the policies that need to be implemented. And so that is something that I really want to focus on this survey, because it's not enough to send like a mailer or like, oh, we invite you to this community input thing. That's not enough. Like we need to go out there. Like they need to get out of their office, out of their cubicles, and go out there to the community, right? And that's one thing that I really want to push on, because, and it's really the focus of what I'm trying to do, because a lot of people here don't know, what their city council government can do, right? They don't know what it is or the power that it has. So it's a lot about showing and imagining what we could have, right? Because everything that we set our minds to is possible. So giving them that possibility and bringing it really to the community. And so, yeah, I want to leave it at that, but there's a few things like that I want to do and focus on, but in particular that survey, because I think that's going to allow us to focus on the long-term, well-being of the whole community, not just unhoused populations.
Yeah, I
Well,
mean, oh, go ahead, Carlos.
no, I think it's critical that what you're saying, because everything starts on the ground. The thing about our politicians is they get elected and then you don't hear from them until the next election. We
Uh-huh.
we want candidates and we want politicians that are on the ground, that are on the front lines, that are out there looking and talking to people, that are inviting, the community leaders to the table, because they are the ones with the ideas. They are the ones talking to the people. They are the ones that are mingling in with the community problems. They bury They carrying the load for the people.
Mm-hmm.
They're never invited to the table. So I think it's very important. I like that idea that, if we're gonna start something, let's start by going into the streets. I literally
Mm-hmm.
get out their offices and they need to get out there on the streets.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and definitely this circles back to everything, every issue we've talked about right now, from electric grid, like what do people need on that? What do people need when it comes to resources and finding out, where they can, get food. We know Carlos does work on that. But more of that, where how because I know that for my local government, they even asked us like, "Do you guys need more fresh food?" And it's like, "Yes, we do. Can you please?" Because most of the time when developers make these apartments or make businesses, they don't ask the community like, "Do you guys want a market? Do you guys want this or that?" Like it's just like we're gonna put Starbucks, we're gonna put a shopping mall. Like hope you guys like it. And when we do this kind of work, like people are kind of like, we didn't need that. We needed something else. So most of the time I'm wondering like how is this neighborhood mine? How is this neighborhood our communities when we don't put a word into what we want and need. So it's a great strategy to really get people involved also and get them to be like, hey, you voted for me and you also get a seat at the table with me. And I want to bring it up to the next question for you. Basically I'm going to ask two in kind of one, if that's okay. What you would do different than the current city council, and the second one is how would you be held accountable by the community?
Yeah. So the first one, how will I bring the community in, or what I would do different, and a lot, very different than what the city council is doing right now. I'll bring one example. In 2018, they passed a measure called Measure LP, where they increased the sales tax by 0.5%. And they're using this money, or they began to use this money to, fund projects within the general fund. One of them is the park. So they started renovating the park a couple years back, and they introduced this project in 2005, and they're just now completing it. So it took, can't do the math, but it took them more than 15 years or so to do this park, and it's really pathetic. But going back to this Measure LP point that was on the ballot in 2018, they promised, and it's even in the question, that they will put or establish a community committee, right, to oversight committee, what's called an oversight committee, to oversee these funds and make sure that they go where they're supposed to be. Well, this committee has never been established. It's never been established, and I don't know if it's probably illegal. If it says on the ballot that it's going to be established and they haven't done it, then I don't think that's legal. Like, but I don't know. I don't want to get into the legalities of it. I'm not an attorney, but it's very questionable for them to not have a committee of community members to oversee this money, this new money that they're now getting, right? And so what I would do is really bring in the public. Like Carlos is saying, we have here a longtime community leader. His name is Manuel Maldonado. He has been an enormous advocate for teachers, moms, and really people of the community who've been here for a long time and have been unheard. And so I want to bring people like him and other folks, right, who know the bread and butter of the issues that are going on a daily basis. Because if you don't bring them, then how are you legislating? Like, how are you implementing your policies without the input of the people that you represent, right? And I would do this. What I want to do is do a monthly meeting with people, sort of a town hall, and open it up either in person or Zoom. But I want to have this concurrently every month. So I bring people in and I hear their concerns, right? Because I need to also like listen to them, right? And I need the support of people and the help of everybody, because I found that the city council positions are very limited in the way that the city manager is the one with the power, right? The city council members, I think here in La Puente, at least, they get paid about $500 a month, and they have healthcare coverage, etc., phones, whatever, for like official duties. But that's not like sustainable, right? That's not a job. Like, I would not be able to live off that. So I have to have another job to be able, if I win, I would have to still have my full-time job and do that, right? But my point is that I'm gonna need like the support and the feedback of everybody that I meet and the whole community, right? Because without that, then I'm not gonna be able to do my job. And it goes back to your second point of accountability, right? Like I do not want to be that elected person who gets elected and they're like deuces, see you in 4 years or 2 years. No, that's absolutely bonkers. I would want to get like criticized, or I would want to get feedback from the public, right? I would want people to be candid with me, like I don't agree with this, or I want you to do this. And I think that's how the accountability is going to be. It's going to be a two-way street. People are gonna have to tell me, what I'm doing wrong or what I'm doing right. And at the end of the day, also, I'm going to be online and in person and tell people what I'm doing, right? Because I think it's important for an elected official to inform the public what they are doing. What is it that they've done in the last couple of weeks, couple months, couple of years? Because if you're not showing them what you're doing, then are you really doing anything? So yeah, I mean, it's going to be a lot about me getting out there and continuing like my message and what I want to do for our city, because really, I really want to focus on, and that's the number one thing of my platform is a people-centered government and budget accountability, right? So it's really centering the public. It's centering the needs of the community that lives here. And it's going to be a big task, because you really have to let people know what can be possible, what they can have, right? We have a downtown area in La Puente, a historic downtown area that basically has been abandoned for decades, generations. It's been like that. They don't have new businesses. Nobody goes there at night to like just hang out, or like a normal, regular downtown area. It doesn't exist. Like it's there, but it doesn't exist, right? And how is that possible? Like, how do we not have a business plan? How do we not have these elected leaders like working on bringing investment to the downtown area? Why don't we provide grants so that small businesses can come in, right? Why is it that we just started a temporary market? They have a market every Fridays, and they started that Friday nights, but that's really a temporary solution, right? That doesn't solve the problem of bringing people in and making sure that there's revenue coming in when people go buy things, right? So there's a lot to be said. But I think for accountability purposes, I'm really going to have to go to the community and tell them what I'm doing, and hear from them. Right, be open about anything that they want to tell me. And by doing these monthly meetings that I want to do, I think that's going to be a great way, because I don't think they've ever had that. The city council members don't hold like monthly meetings. Or another thing I want to do is to bring the city council meetings to the public. Like, why don't we have them at the park, like every quarter, instead of the city chambers? Why don't we bring them to the park, like outside, right? Why does it have to be at this like bougie city hall place? Like it just it turns people away from that, right? And we need to be as welcoming. The city council needs to be as welcoming as they can be. Um, but yeah, hopefully that answer your point, Jackie.
Yeah, no, it does. I mean, we talked about serving the public, which, as you said, knocking on doors, and that's already a way to introduce yourself and introduce when, once you're elected and everything, how it is that you're going to be running things, and how it is that you're going to involve them. So I think that's a great way, because most of the time, I'm going to tell you, in my local city government, when I have talked to city councils, they've been like, "Oh yeah, I'm sure, whatever," like, and then kind of dismiss my ideas, and then kind of even dismiss me as like, "Oh, you look young, you might just not know." And it's one of those things where I'm like, "No, I'm young, and that's the reason why I want you to listen to me." I know Carlos has said that a lot, listen to the youth. And this is where, we have the ideas. You're running for city council. You're going to have a lot of your public support and people giving you input. And that's what I would say would be good accountability, because I would want to be able to talk to somebody that I can, not only relate to, because obviously we're millennials and we're also, having the same struggles with everything that's going on, but you're also open to listen already. You're already telling us you're open to listen. And most city council members just get elected, see you in 4 years or 2 years, whatever, and that's it. But I do want to just kind of wrap this up with you, Ricardo, to to talk to you and let you know that when you came out to the Comerco protest, like that was huge for a lot of folks, because you're already out here doing environmental justice work. You're already out here showing the community that you care about their health, and that to me is like we need politicians to be right here at the protest, to be with us doing every single move that we're trying to do as a community and grassroots organizations. And that's basically the the whole component of a progressive candidate. And I do want to thank you for running, especially in this harsh environment and political environment. And thank you so much for being so brave on this.
No, thank you for this invitation. And yeah, for me, maybe because I'm young, or I just am a progressive or think differently, or I think it's necessary, right? For I think leaders or people who want to protect others or represent other people to be out there in the community. Like I just don't see other way to do it. Like how would you be able to represent a group of people without you being part of it, right? It doesn't really make sense to me. And this Comeco and these other companies, they're basically exploiting and taking advantage of other people, right? And they don't deserve to be here, right? They don't deserve to be in our communities. That they continue to pollute our environment, and our kids suffer. The future generation of this community and around that company is going to suffer, right?
Ricardo, I was wondering, have you heard of Murray Bookchin by any chance?
Mary.
Murray Bookchin. So I really recommend that you read his writings. He was, well, first he started off as a socialist, communist. Like from the age of 8 years old, something like that. His whole family was very much involved in the workers' movement in the United States. Eugene Debs, that whole period was very influential for him. And then he became an anarchist because he got frustrated with some of the things that he saw going on in the movement, in the labor movement. And then he kind of moved away from anarchism because he got frustrated with some of the more individualist leanings in that space. And he sort of brought together what he saw were the best of both worlds. And he called it communitarianism. And it's based off of majority democracy, but direct democracy. And it's all based around the municipality and radical municipality, or radical municipalism. And he also wrote something called social ecology. So there's a really nice mix here, a blend of dealing with ecology and climate change, and also tying it in to the local level at the political level. And I really recommend that you look into that as somebody running for city council, because something that he talks about that I would love to see more of are the public assemblies. And so what you're talking about, like, let's bring the city council out to the park. Let's bring the people in. Let's have office hours, right? Well, you can extend that. Spread that power that you have and that other city council members have out into the public through by creating these type of assemblies where people in the city can say, not only tell you what they need, but also create the policies that they want, right? And so you're becoming then a surrogate for them, and they're telling you, they're like, we came together in our community and this is what we need, and we're telling you what we need now. We want you to go do it, right? And they can vote, and anyone can participate, and it can happen at any place within La Puente, for example. Like it could be by neighborhood, block by block, however way it makes sense. I just think that
That's
you
it.
have the right.
That's
You have
something
the
that
right mindset.
I was already like, I want to do committees based on particular issues, right? So a committee for housing, a committee for healthcare, because there's always people and leaders who have a particular niche or particular experience, right? So that goes straight into what I want to do and build these committees, right? Because I think you're absolutely right. You need to have like the support of people that already live here, right? I can't do it alone, right? I can't be on the phones with so many experts or so many people and trying to do it myself. I have to get the community's input and support. And yes, I want to do these committees, which is something similar than what you're talking about. So I'm definitely going to read that book. Yes.
Yeah, he's written quite a few things. I don't think I have the book in with me here. I might have taken it home. I might have taken it to California. I think it's on my bed. But I'll let Jackie know, and she can send you some references. But
Oh,
I
I'm
think
interested.
I think you guys will really like Murray Bookchin. He's pretty awesome, or was pretty. He passed away in the early 2000s, but his daughter is still Debbie Bookchin. She edited the most recent book, put a collection together of his writings, and she's done all sorts of really great work trying to promote his ideas around municipalism and communitarianism. And I think he was really ahead of everybody else in his thinking about the way society should be within the environment. You know, really connecting ecology to society and politics. So yeah, I think you'll both really like Murray Bookchin.
I'm
Well,
going to read that book.
yeah,
Yeah.
things that I know for sure is uh, part of the lack of leadership that we have is that leadership are always just reacting to everything. They don't plan ahead. They're not, we knew, for example, that climate change scientists been talking about this for years, for decades, and they were not taking this serious. They were not preparing. So everything that we see that politicians do are just reacting to the problems. And that's why they have no answers. That's why
Yeah.
they have no idea how to handle it because they have lack leadership in preparing themselves and preparing anything and setting aside, uh, plans or monies or whatever. We are just reacting every single time.
Yeah.
That's a major, major
Yeah.
problem with our leaders all over the United States at every
You know,
level.
Carlos, this week, my partner actually showed me Bernie was talking about it, and we both heard the statement where he was talking about, this is a dire situation for the world. And, my partner was like, that is a quote that, comes out in movies. It comes out in some type of story that is out there far away from now, and it's now, like Bernie said it now. And to hear that felt like, wow, we are in trouble, like I he's probably the only one that I heard in the Senate say this, and my heart out to Bernie. I mean, he tried, he's trying, but it's only, we need more of people that are going to care. We need more people local
Yeah.
level everywhere. We everywhere.
Yeah, that's why it's important to have people like Ricardo, people like you, people like Margaret, people that are listening to this. You are part of the solution. You are part of the solution. Get involved. This is why we got to get connected. We get them elected, but we stay connected. Our problem is that we get them elected and then we disconnect.
Or they disconnect.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, okay, we've gone 3 minutes over an hour, so we do have to wrap it up because I'm on the East Coast, and that means it's after 11 p.m. here, and I'm ready to go to bed. So thank you so much, Ricardo, for joining us today. It's been such a fascinating discussion, and really excited about your campaign in La Puente, and I really hope that you succeed because the people of La Puente can really use a politician and a leader like you who can bring them along with you into the halls of the city
How can they
council.
find?
So
How can
yeah,
they?
Yeah.
Yeah. So go ahead and head to ricardoforcitycouncil.com or also on social media, Ricardo for LP. So LP stands for La Puente, Ricardo for LP. And I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, but mostly Instagram and in person throughout here, walking the streets because I think that's going to take me to the finish line, getting to meet people face to face. But
awesome.
really, thank you all so much for this invitation and really great conversation. I hope to keep in touch with all of you.
And
Thank you.
Ricardo, one more time, give out your contact info one more time in case they missed it.
Yeah, so Ricardo for LP at Ricardo for LP. That's the social media handle. And the website is ricardo4citycouncil.com. And it's FOR, for citycouncil.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. We're all out of time. But as always, you've been watching Stand Up Fight Back, where we discuss strategy and analysis for the progressive movement. I've been one of your three co-hosts on the show. I'm Margot Baez. I'm a scientist and an engineer and occasional journalist. Right below me, that's Jackie Hernandez, one of your other amazing co-hosts. She's a health advocate. She's got a wealth of experience of dealing politics in California and is really insightful on a lot of the way policy works in the state. Carlos Marroquin is our third co-host and anchor on this show. He is just the most wonderful community organizer you can imagine. He's always out there working hard for people who need someone like him, who have been abandoned by everybody else. Carlos is there for them, and he's been there for all of us too. So thank you always. And of course, our guest, Ricardo Martinez, he's running for city council in La Puente. So please, if you're in that area, please vote for him and please go out there and support his campaign. So we'll see you again next week, Sunday, 7 p.m. Pacific time, 10 p.m. Eastern time. We air on Facebook and YouTube. We're at Inside Out News on YouTube, and we're on a couple of Facebook pages on Facebook. So please follow us, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, and share us with everybody you know. We'll be here again next week. So take care, everyone. Thank you, and have a really good night.
Thank you, everybody.